The break room at work was colder than usual. As I stood there snacking on my stale cookies from yesterday's meeting while I was refilling my coffee, the cup immediately warmed me up as I was sleepy from all the extra hours I put in over the weekend. Yet at the same time, I still felt the sense of pride and accomplishment. I was killing it at work. I was working harder than any of my other colleagues, proving that I was an indispensable member of the team. I was even wearing this outfit that stretched beyond my monthly budget, but I still felt confident, impressive, and I felt like I belonged. I was getting closer and closer to becoming the HR executive I've always dreamed of being ever since I could understand the concept of what human resources was. And as I debated in my mind whether I should order a sandwich or Chinese food for lunch in a seemingly ordinary moment, I suddenly found myself falling straight into the gender pay gap. Nearby, my male colleagues were discussing their summer plans, and I overheard one of them, who was in the exact same position that I was in, discussing his salary in passing. I stopped in my tracks and did some math in my sleepy head and realized that we were in the exact same position. In fact, I even had more experience than him, but he was making 20% more than me. I remembered reading a statistic from the US Department of Labor that says people who identify as women are paid 83.7% of what their male counterparts are paid. I remember reading the statistic, noting it, but quickly turning the page. So now my mind was swirling. What had I done wrong? What landed me in this position to where he was making so much more than me? In my mind, I replayed the moment when I received the job offer. I remember being so excited, bursting at the seams with excitement. But I also remember being so scared that if I didn't accept the job offer immediately, that they would take it away from me. So I accepted instantly and I never negotiated. So now, fueled by the desire to set things right, I knew that once I got the courage to talk to the leadership team, they would have my back. They would realize that this has all been a mistake. They would fix this because they knew I was an indispensable member of the team. So I mustered up the courage and I approached my boss's office. And she greeted me with a smile, and we made some small talk about an upcoming deadline. And I told her what happened. I hoped for some insight, maybe a glimmer of empathy, but instead, I was met with indifference. She shrugged it off, citing budget constraints, and gave me this really dismissive response. And that was so painful for me. But it also hit me. In my manager's indifference, I thought about what it truly means to support and champion your team and how that's such a crucial part of leadership. If you're a leader, the success of your organization is so strongly tied to the way that you relate to your employees. There have been so many studies that show that employee satisfaction is one of the strongest predictors of company performance and success because employees need to feel heard, valued, and seen and protected. According to the Society of Human Resources Management, employee satisfaction boils down to three things: one, respectful treatment of all employees; two, compensation and salary; and three, trust between employers and their employees. So, how does all of this look like in practice? Well, there are so many different strategies that you can put into practice, but today I want to share with you one strategy that you can put into practice that's going to help you become a great leader. And that is great leaders know their shadow. So, what exactly does that mean? So, in order to understand this concept more, we look at this work of the late psychologist Carl Jung. According to Jung, our shadow is composed of the parts of us that we don't consciously accept or recognize. And these parts can be discovered when we have a negative, hard time tolerating them in others. These are the parts of us that we have a hard time taking ownership of because they're the negative qualities that we see in others. But if we don't do the shadow work, it can lead to unconscious behavior that's often directed towards others. And that can really, really hurt our capacity to lead. For example, after my gender pay gap moment, I began watching my own habits, and here's what I discovered. In team meetings, my colleague Sarah would consistently interrupt me while I was explaining my ideas, It bothered me. She spoke with authority, often diverting the conversation, leaving me to feel like my ideas were being dismissed or minimized. One day, Sarah came to me and she said she wanted to talk to me in private about my leadership style. She said that she felt undervalued and disrespected when I was interrupting her in these meetings. And she even said that my behavior was hindering the team's ability to be creative and collaboration. My initial instinct was to be defensive. Was she calling me a bossy know it all? If anyone was the bossy know it all, it was her. But I paused. And sometimes your colleague's behavior is truly unacceptable. But in this case, what I realized is that the way she described my behavior was the exact behavior that I was critical of her for. And in my ability to pause and reflect, I realized that what I had seen in Sarah was a reflection of my own shadow, a piece of me that I didn't want to see. And once I could see that clearly, I was able to neutralize my anger towards Sarah. How could you be upset for something that someone did that you did to them? As a leader, I had a choice to make. I could either brush off Sarah's feedback, or I could get curious about my own shadow. And I decided to take the latter path. And when I did that, I realized my need to appear knowledgeable was rooted in the fear of appearing weak or indecisive as a leader. I realized that I had to do the work, look inward, and admit the pieces of me that I didn't want to admit were there. So I engaged in a process of self reflection and shadow work. I started actively listening to my team members and my colleagues, encouraging them to speak without any interruption, and consciously starting to recognize everyone's contributions in areas of expertise. So, what about you? Have you met your shadow? Let's take 2 minutes to identify one of your shadows. Think about a time at work someone did something really upsetting to you. Recall that moment. What did you dislike about it? Observe the feeling in your body. Now take a moment to think. Was there a time in the past where you may have acted in a similar way? Often we don't want to admit we may have acted in a similar way because this is the ugliness of our shadow coming to light that we usually try to unconsciously bury it because it's often just too ugly to bear. And if you recognize that some of your own actions were similar to what bothered you, then congratulations, you've met your shadow. But oftentimes, it's not that easy. Another way of practicing shadow work is paying attention to the daily interactions that you have with others. Pay attention to the things that they're doing or saying that are upsetting to you. Does your body get filled with rage? Do you start to feel this visceral reaction to what they are saying? Because these could all be clues that the things that are bothering you about other people are just your shadow being reflected back to you. Once you identify your shadow, it's so much easier to respond to your employees from a place of authenticity and care. Rather than responding defensively or indifferently like my manager did that day, you can be fully present and address the issues at hand. When I think back to that day with my manager, I think about what it would have meant if she just would have heard and seen my situation. If she would have offered a little bit of remorse, just even offered to speak to her leadership team about the problem, ah, I would have felt reassured of my worth and my value to the team. The gender pay gap is one of the many unjust dynamics that exist in the workplace today. Systemic issues are woven deep into the fabric of organizations and deep into the fabric of our own minds. The only way these deep culture shifts can occur is unless leadership makes change a priority. But a great way leaders can be successful in this change is if they start paying attention to their own shadow. Shadow work allows us to expand our capacity to what we're seeing so we can really truly support and champion our employees. Getting to know your shadow will help you be a leader who can lead with integrity and authenticity and care. What I like to say is your employees don't work for you. You work for your employees. And I think most great leaders think that. And what you're doing is when you're working on your shadow, you're actually showing up for your team. And trust me, your team will notice. Thank you.